Before we begin, thank you very much to Griffin S. for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the support. Really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you also to everyone who might be putting up with the sound of rain in this video, because it's been raining and thundering all day, and I tried to wait it out, but frankly, I've got no time left to wait it out. So we just gotta bear through it, and if you can hear the noise in the background, I do apologize. Hopefully my microphone's good enough at being the directional mic it's supposed to be to blot a lot of that out. But on a rainy day here, we're going to go to a rainy day topic that I've been meaning to get to, which is size classes, because let's be honest, they don't make sense anymore. We went through the whole reason why core class kind of bombed out, and that's because that class never really made sense. In short, the character, the line itself, the size itself seemed to lack a lot of focus. The toys seemed to be undersized for the price they were asking. They failed to incorporate themselves into the main lines in a really satisfying way. They didn't play with the play patterns when they were, shared gimmicks or something, or aesthetics, and they failed to incorporate into the Titans, which is a point that I thought of later. That is also a huge point. But the point being is that core class, as a name itself, made no sense. And the more you think about this, the more none of these price points make any sense. Sometimes the number attached to them does not make sense. Sometimes the name itself doesn't make sense. What is Voyager class? What does Voyager class tell me about why a toy is that size and that price? Tell me why we still call it leader class when the majority of the time it's not a leader character, Blitzwing's not a leader character. Why is he leader class? So I just want to bring a little bit of sense and normalcy to this, so we're going to run through this. And while we're at it, I'm going to also fantasy book new price points while we're doing this. Now, I am not an economist. I don't know the inner workings of Hasbro or the actual costs of Transformer toys and the production, okay? I'm just a fan that thinks a lot of things are way more expensive than they should be. Not because I would prefer to spend less, I would, of course, but because when I look around, I see things that make me realize Hasbro seems to be reaching a little bit more than other companies are. So let's take Playmates, for instance. So Playmates has done these reissues of the Mutant Ninja Turtles from back in the day. These were my turtle toys. I loved these things, not only because they were Transformers, but they were actually more articulate than most of those old school Ninja Turtle toys. I love these. These were really fun, and it was great to see them reissued. And I was actually surprised that the reissue price point for them was $14.99, which for a 25-year-old toy seems completely reasonable. That does not bother me. That price does not bother me in the least. I probably would have been happy at $19.99 if they didn't skip out on some of the deco and details. That said, it does kind of make me go, even if I compare them to Earthspark Deluxes that are $20, I still look at the two together and go this still doesn't feel right. There's something about this just does not feel like these should be. These feel like they're on par with each other, but why is this one $5 more? And I'm not seeing why. And that's kind of getting frustrating. That's more recent. Something I noticed a while ago came with a Jurassic Park toy. This transforming T-Rex. Now, it's fully painted. There is quite a bit of paint on this toy. Admittedly, not as much as, say, Kingdom Megatron, but the dyno mode is actually larger. I would actually say their engineering is comparable. At the very least, the part count and assembly is very similar between the two. And this one is electronic. In fact, both modes have their own dedicated sound button with their own dedicated sound effects. This toy in front of you retailed originally for $49.99. So it's a little bit bigger, still has a complex transformation, and it's electronic, but it's cheaper than Kingdom Megatron. And that starts getting a little bit fishy. that starts getting a little bit weird. Got weirder when I saw Playmates do a new run of their legendary Voltron, and I pick up the Black Lion. The Black Lion retails $39.99 for a toy that is larger than a lot of my leader class Transformers and has like 40 odd sound effects in it. Some ridiculous number. Obviously, it doesn't match the complexity of transformation engineering, but by sheer plastic mass and weight, it's still comparable. It still makes me go like, maybe Hasbro really is on the wrong track here. Because there's two ways to go about it. There's two strategies to sales like this. One of them is to just try to get as much as you can per purchase. And Hasbro has continually, gradually upped the prices of their Transformers without ever dropping them back down when they got smaller or when they were producing in numbers that meant they could produce them cheap for less. So that makes me question, like maybe it's time to just flat out redo the whole thing. Because the other way of doing it is through quantity of sales, to produce enough and sell enough to where you can still make the same amount of profit off of a smaller price point. Maybe not a whole lot smaller, but to do it through quantity is a valid strategy. And you can absolutely do that because a big complaint with Transformer fans is the cost of the toys these days. If they feel cheaper, the price point should be cheaper. So let's go through. We're just gonna fantasy book this whole thing in the way I would want Transformers to be done. So for starters, we know Core Class is going away. Here's what you do. I would replace Core Class with something completely new, completely different. We have not done this before. I call it the Standard Class. I have to call it Standard Class because we have a Deluxe class. So obviously, if you have a Deluxe, you need a Standard. It's like, you don't really see it anymore, but it's like when you used to go to some movie theaters and they would offer like a medium and a large soda without offering a small. That's not how that works. Like I said, they don't do it anymore. Used to be a thing though. But for Standard Class, the goal is twofold here. So Standard Class is a way of releasing smaller characters that are going to be in scale with the majority of the line. So that is your Bumblebees and your Mini-Bots, etc. Because I don't think any one of us was really that comfortable paying $24.99 for animated Bumblebee. It's a good toy for its size, but I am sorry. That is not nearly worth $25 compared to a lot of the other deluxes, even in its own wave. It needed to be at a smaller price point, but none exists. So my Standard Class, that's where it's going to live. I'm looking at something like $16 a figure on that one. And I'm putting it at that price for a few reasons. We'll get to that in a bit. So along with characters like, your Pipes, Huffer, Gears, your Mini-Bots, to put them in a proper scale. I like my Deluxe Mini-Bots. They've been good toys, but they're too big. They just are. So instead, this size class is also going to include some legacy characters that are big deal and big names. So your Prowls, your Prowls, your Smokescreens, your Jazzes, potentially like Reflector, and more like normal size Transformers, but we're offering them at this $16 price point, so they're on the small side. And I'll tell you why when we get to it. Aside from the fact that it's going to mean that every wave has a big deal name in it, which means retailers are going to want it. So you only do like one per wave, just as like an extra. We'll get to why in a minute. We'll also do this. 2-pack cassettes. Oh my God. I feel so dirty paying $10 for one cassette just because it has the pile drivers that I'm not going to use, or a big speaker to mount to it that I'm never going to use. That feels gross. Like when you're playing with the actual toy, the actual Transformer, the thing you actually paid the $10 for, it feels nasty. Like it really does. Understand, if Transformers kept up with the cost of inflation properly, a Deluxe should only be like a little over $20. So this tiny little thing is now $10. Like, God, it's wrong. 2-pack them in, throw away those useless accessories, and now you've got something that I'm comfortable paying. That's how you get cassettes out. It's also how you get mini-cons out. 2-pack mini-cons, yeah, do versus packs, so like Swindle and Jolt Hotshot and Starscream need their minicons, so you 2-pack them as a versus set. And that's how you get your minicons out. So you see, this has a lot of viability, and it's doing what the small size is supposed to do. Focus on the small characters that otherwise can't get toys out, and we can cover multiple generations this way. So that's your identity for standard class, on top of just being a nice entry-level point. Aside from just having the occasional big deal mini-bot like Bumblebee, we're also incorporating those occasional Prowls, Jazzes, that mid-range of Autobot at that size, so kids have an affordable way of getting into the Transformers. And they're still substantial enough at that size to where it's fun to mess with them. They're not cheap. They feel like real Transformers. So that's the goal of my standard class. Keeping in mind, I'm not going to limit the number of releases like Core Class did. That was another fault of Core Class, is just they didn't make enough toys. They didn't fill out waves with enough interesting stuff. So they overcrowded shelves full of, just overproduced things. We're not going to do that this time. That moves us on to Deluxe Class, and I'm keeping the name Deluxe Class, but I'm moving it down to like a $22 price point. That's a little bit more in line with like the actual rise of inflation. So that's where I'm a little bit more comfortable. And you can actually see this happening today. There are actually retailers that are pulling back the price on Deluxes and Voyagers to something a little bit more reasonable, which kind of indicates, yeah, they've been gouging us all along. It's not a universal thing. I'm seeing it more and more. But point being, yeah, Deluxes just don't feel $25. So like, just take a little bit of the edge off. 22, maybe $22.99. Do it, and make your money through the quantity of sales, because I really think all a lot of us really want is for them to just take the edge off the price so it doesn't feel so gross to buy, just so it reflects the product we're getting. So, on top of just doing, being the bulk of the main theme of the year, whatever that theme of generations is that particular year, the thing we're also going to incorporate into Deluxe is big name characters that are larger in size. So, one per wave, you're going to get an Optimus Prime, or a Starscream, or a Megatron, or a Soundwave. You're going to get these big deal, big name characters that are typically reserved for the higher price points. One, because that allows kids to have a toy of the big time Transformer characters without having to spend a lot of money or save up their allowance for a long time. Two, keeps retailers happy because, again, big names in each wave. That will make them thrilled. Three, it's going to incorporate with those standard class toys that I talked about, the Prowls, the Jazzes. They will scale. So we are building a micro world line within the Generations line, similar to how they did a whole separate mini line for Transformers Prime and Dark of the Moon. I always like that play pattern. I always like that sales pattern. So I want to do it again, and I want to incorporate it as like a one-off thing. Like the packaging will have something to denote that this part of like micro world or whatever you end up calling it. But it allows for a little bit more variety, allows for an excuse to put a legacy character in there, makes retailers happy, gets gets kids big characters without having to break the bank. I like all of that as a goal for this. And because it's deluxe, there's going to be plenty of toys. You're talking about at least 2 or 3 other figures per wave. You're going to have plenty of room for all of that year's new characters or the deep cut pulls that Generations likes to do these days. We move up to Voyager. I like Voyager always being about $10 over a deluxe. So, you're $32, $33 around there. Again, just take the edge off the price, And Voyager's doing its own thing. Now, Voyagers do not have nearly as many releases as deluxes, and that's there's a logic to that. I'm not going to say like overproduce them. But if we're talking this little like mini line within the line that we're talking about, This is where you break out the giants. I'm not going to be like super strict on the scale. Optimus and Grimlock should be in the same size class. I'm not saying Grimlock needs to tower over Optimus Prime, but he needs to be designated as one of the bigger characters. So like every other wave, you drop in a Jetfire. You drop in like these giant characters that otherwise you would have to spend commander class price to get. And this way, not only do you again have these giant characters that kids can feasibly afford and works in scale with our standard and our deluxe, but we actually have a way of having like a desktop sized version of some of these characters. Also, by the way, the name for this scale, I like the old names. I want like there's standard class and then there's deluxe class, but I really think at that point, you pull it back to the way they used to be called. So like, I want this to be mega class, standard, deluxe, mega, and then we will build up from there. So if we're talking about this, something else to do, giants again. Where is the way of getting a Marvel Comics Scorponok? Because Marvel Comics Scorponok is not only different in deco from the Titan, but also much smaller. And there's no room for that in Transformers right now. This is how you make room. So Scorponok gets to just be a Voyager. You get to have a Scorponok on your desk if you're a Scorponok fan without, making room, like having to build an extra shelf onto said desk. This is kind of where I end the micro line though. 3 sizes, that's it. Everything beyond here doesn't get enough toys per year to really justify a micro line built in. But I think that's enough groundwork to where, like, because it's a very slow distribution of those toys, you could put that in for years, And, even if the packaging changes, you put like that micro world, like some in the same spot on every box, just so everyone knows this is all the same thing. That works for me. That's more fun to me. So let's move up. Let's move up here. So leader class, if we're going from mega, this would now be ultra class. This is a $45 price point. I'm sorry. Like, there's nothing in me that is convinced that, like Legacy Dreadwing, that's not a $55 toy. It's a larger Voyager class toy. There isn't enough in the engineering and there isn't enough with the accessories for me to go, that is absolutely a $55 toy. This is the price point where I really need to see it come down because there's just a lot that doesn't work. I might give them a pass and say, let's make it 50 because there are like triple changers that are very dense. They're a little larger than Voyagers, but they're very dense in part count and assembly because of the triple changing nature. But just don't throw in all this useless junk with all of these triple changers just to justify that. Take the price down instead, I don't need Hulk hands with Blitzwing. I don't need a big rack of guns with Astro Train. This is pointless guff that you're just using to justify keeping the price point where it is. And that's hurting you. Not only because you're making your product less purchasable, you're also upsetting fans by pulling nonsense like this. No. This price point just needs to come down. Plain and simple. 45 if you're going to keep it to just larger than Voyager toys, or 50 if you're going to keep doing triple changers that are more complex. Gives you a little bit of room to work on larger toys as well. But yeah, no. 55 is way too much for what we're getting for leader right now. That's the one where I feel like, yeah, you absolutely could come down. And if you're selling more than you currently are, I don't think it's going to hurt you. From here, we do hit another problem though. Okay, so if we go from size classes, so we have now Mega, Ultra, which would make this Supreme class. I really like using Supreme in this. Here's the problem. I would probably leave the price alone. I probably would, because once we start getting beyond leader class, the problem that causes the prices is the size of the molds needed for the parts and the sheer number of molds needed for the parts. That is something that the smaller sizes, even leader class, generally does not have to worry about. So, but the larger we get, the larger the parts have to be from the ground up. That's where this starts getting a little bit excessive. And now I start to see the price, you know, as opposed to most leader classes where I really don't feel like they're worth 55 bucks. I'm hard pressed to think about a commander class toy that I actually haven't been upset over paying for. You know, even the likes of like Motormaster, yeah, like he actually has a lot to him. Like he's kind of this weird, fun super mode kind of thing, even if it is kind of a lanky super mode. It's still a lot of play value and a lot of density, parts, and size. Like I can actually see why he's that price. So I might leave Commander at 80 bucks, 80 or 90, whatever it is now. I might leave it there. That seems okay to me. That seems fair. That seems fine, provided they keep doing very complex characters at very good sizes with very good quality the way they have done. So that's my Supreme class, and that takes us into Titan. I might leave Titan alone. Like, there's that part of me that's like tempted to bring back Ultimate class. That sounds fun too, but I think there's just like we've had Titan so long. There's just such a resonance to it now. I don't think you can change Titan. And that's pretty much where we ended off, because I really wouldn't touch Titan either. Again, because the price is exploding because of the size of the molds is exemplified by the Titan class. So there you go. So we start off with a brand new concept of standard class. We go to deluxe, mega, ultra, supreme, and then hypothetically ultimate. But it's not necessary. But that's just kind of my idea for the day. You know, prices are nuts. Size classes are nonsensical. I think it's time for a complete flush and a complete redo. And that's kind of how I would do it. So let me know what you thought in the comments below. And as always, I will see you next time.